I keep thinking Oregon's a little overrated in these way too early top 25 pieces, but then I remember something.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. We've got safety discussion, which is a rather important position group for the Ducks going forward, as we all know. And Oregon beats Washington on the hardwood, and that beats the alternative, plus another question about the conference championship picture in the Big Ten going into next season. But starting with what I am seeing all over the place, and it's a natural reaction after the college football season has officially come to a close, the way too early top 25. Oregon's a consensus way too early top 25, top 10 team. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Hopefully we understood that mouthful out there. But I understand that. Some people put Oregon inside the top 5. And some people, such as, for instance, there's a piece over at ESPN that I thought was actually pretty good and a solid read by Mark Schlabach. Apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. He's got Oregon at number 6. The teams he's got ahead of him are Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State in that order. He's got Ohio State 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Notre Dame 4, Georgia 5, and Oregon 6. And I said last week on the show, and still believe, that I don't have the same level of national championship expectations for Oregon this year because there is so much roster resetting that is taking place. So as a result, when I see Oregon be a preseason way too early top 5 team in the country, I think, oh, that's ridiculous. Number 6, boy, that's really high for a team that's got an unproven quarterback and losing a bunch of guys and all that stuff. But then I remember something. And that one thing is that college football's parity level took off this year in a way that I don't think we've really seen before. Ohio State was the best team throughout the entire playoff. No one disputes that. I mean, their run was incredibly impressive. But they also lost to a 7-5 Michigan team that wasn't that great. They then beat Alabama in their bowl game, but still, that was not a very good Michigan team. So the thing that hits me, that kind of makes me more optimistic about what Oregon could perhaps do next year, amidst all the roster change that they're going to undergo, is the college football landscape is so much more balanced that it's hard to build a dominant team. Ohio State was dominant in the playoff. They weren't dominant all season. They lost to Oregon, lost to Michigan, tight game with Nebraska. Heck, they were pushed by Marshall for a quarter and a half. And I think Oregon fans should understand that sometimes those teams at a lower level can sneak up on you on your home field. But I think the way that college football has moved benefits Oregon, to be sure, but also kind of gives any fan base a reason to be more optimistic than they would have in previous years. Because going into 2022, with the way that Georgia played in 21 and how much talent they had coming back, and Stetson Bennett was still there, you looked at them and thought, boy, that might be the best team and it might not matter. But I don't think there's it doesn't matter team. There isn't a 2019 LSU out there or a 2020 Bama or one of those Georgia teams. I know Ohio State looks like that now, but again, I'll repeat, Oregon beat the national champions. Michigan beat the national champions. So every year, I expect Oregon to be able to put themselves into discussion with the way they are recruiting and stacking these classes and the way they can bring in talent to fill key spots in the transfer portal. I expect them to be a playoff team every single year. And right now, when I look at Oregon's schedule, they've got, let's say, an advantageous start to the season. Their toughest non-conference games are Oklahoma State and Oregon State, all about the OSU matchups for black and orange teams, apparently. And those games are both being played at Autzen Stadium. And the way that Oregon's buys are structured, it's an incredibly favorable schedule, which is great. Because as I said before, I don't think next year's Oregon team will be as good as the one that just played to a 13-0 season and a Big Ten championship. But could Oregon wind up playing for a Big Ten championship again? Yeah. Yeah, they could. You don't have Ohio State. You don't have Michigan. You have Indiana at home. Yeah, you have to go to Penn State, and that's going to be a really tough game because Penn State's got a bunch of key returners. But everywhere that you look in college football, whether it's the SEC or the Big Ten, which has won both national championships, a reset year, the type of which I'm describing here for my expectations for the Ducks this season, doesn't have the same level of drop-off as it might in previous years of college football because you don't have a big juggernaut up there. Someone could pull an upset, win a game that you don't think they should, and suddenly this team gets picked off or that team doesn't make the playoff. Of course, there's a lot more leeway in the 12-team playoff now, but yeah, I think Oregon being behind Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State in a preseason top 25, I think that tracks. But anytime I go to, boy, it seems really high. I look at who's behind them. And again, in this piece over at ESPN by Schlabach, Clemson is at 7. They could be good. Yeah, Clemson's a good team. LSU's at 8. They haven't won double-digit games under Brian Kelly yet. Doesn't mean they can't. BYU's at 9. That seems a little high. South Carolina is 10. Great story, end of the year. Iowa State, 11. Alabama is at 12. That could be low, but it could also be just right. Illinois is at 13. I just watched that matchup on the field. Illinois is returning a lot of their players from this year's team. Arizona State at 14. SMU at 15. And so I think about the prospect of, well, maybe Oregon should be the preseason top 12 team. Maybe they should. And I go, I don't know who I'm putting them behind. I don't know, because I like a lot of things about what Oregon's going to be able to bring to the table. But I think just year in and year out, you're just going to have a lot of different teams that feel like they're at a similar level. And one team, like Ohio State did this year, will elevate in the playoff, and they will be able to make that sort of push. But throughout the year, yeah, Oregon should be in the fold once again. They, according to our friends at FanDuel, have the third best odds to win the national championship. Now that's a little bit high. They're behind. They're tied actually for second now in the odds with Texas, and they're behind Ohio State, who's the favorite to repeat. I would not have Oregon ahead of Georgia. I don't know that I would have them ahead of Notre Dame, pending what happens with the Irish at quarterback, but Oregon, again, has a question mark at quarterback. I like what Dante Moore brings to the table a lot. Mega talent. But you have a lot, and this is a theme in college football next year. Most of these big teams, like here are the preseason top 10, at least right now, national title odds teams. Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Tennessee. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Clemson, LSU. I didn't count that quickly. Clemson has their quarterback returning. Tennessee does. Alabama does not. Notre Dame does not. Penn State does. Georgia does not. Oregon does not. Texas does not. Ohio State does not. So quarterback turnover is a reason that in my mind I go, yeah, that's going to be tough to do that. But unless the only teams that are going to be able to win a national championship are Penn State or Clemson or Tennessee, someone's going to be winning a national championship in all likelihood, breaking in a new starting quarterback. So there are going to be a lot of fun elements to it. The college football season starts 213 days from the day that the show's airing. I am already anxiously awaiting. But let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below or hit me up on Twitter as well. The safety room is the biggest position group where I'd like to see Oregon improve, and it really appears like they have. Will we see a true freshman playing? Coming up right now, though, is Prize Picks. They're bringing you today's show and this particular message. That's the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, Prize Picks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. 1,000 times your cash just by making a few simple picks. So that's a pretty good situation for you. If you know who's popping off or who's going dormant in a playoff game, check them out over at Prize Picks. Ready to run your game this football season? I'm so excited. I just bumped my desk right there. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. I need second segment tips. and Oregon needs to be better at the safety position. I think Oregon's going to be better at the safety position next year. I'm optimistic about that for a couple of reasons. So I want to talk about Na'eem Offord first, and then we'll get to the story I saw on Dylan Thieneman, the transfer safety from Purdue that Oregon brings in. So Sam Spiegelman of Rivals was going through a bunch of big-time prospects that are going to make an impact in college football or could make an impact early in their careers. And he was talking about Na'eem Offord. Now, this is a guy who had been rumored to be wanting to flip away from Ohio State going back to the summer months, and Auburn was seen as the leader, and Oregon swooped in on National Signing Day and was able to get him. 5-star defensive back, listed as a corner originally. Now, Rivals has him as an athlete, and Spiegelman was going around in the Twitter sphere the other day. And by the other day, I mean yesterday, as you're listening to or watching the show, though it could be the other day. Some of you listen 2 or 3 days after, and that's okay. I appreciate you regardless. He said that Offord has the ability to play both the safety and the nickel position, and that's probably what he might even play at Oregon. Also described him as an elite return specialist. Now, Oregon's return game, I have been, shall we say, not thrilled with what the Ducks have brought to the table all the time, or at least coming into this year I wasn't. But then they put Tez Johnson back as a punt returner. He was really good. Whittington as a kick returner, I thought did a great job. And most kickoffs are touchbacks nowadays because kickers are hitting the weight room a little bit more and they're just getting a lot better. Like every other aspect of sports, athletes are just getting better at whatever their job is. So it's not as big of a deal, but something perhaps to watch for in spring football if Offord can kind of capture that role. Because you've still got Noah Whittington in there in theory to return kicks, but for the punt return game, Ryan Pelham was next in line, but he's no longer with the team. So Offord playing as a nickel or as a safety, as a true freshman, I get excited about that prospect because when you have a guy that comes in and can be that good immediately, I think about a guy like Caleb Downs at Ohio State, who was at Alabama as a true freshman, transferred to Ohio State. He was an instant impact guy. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and was immediately one of the best safeties in college football. I heard someone talking, I think it was Josh Pate maybe, that said he was talking to an NFL scout discussing Ohio State's roster, who said if Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs were eligible for the draft this year, both guys would be first round, probably top 10 picks, and the first non-quarterbacks taken off the board. Like, they are crazy, crazy talented. And we saw that all season long. They're a big reason why Ohio State won the national championship and a big reason why Ohio State will be the Big Ten title favorites going into next year as well. But for Offord, if he's going to move and play safety or nickel, I think either one of those spots could be available. Now, Oregon brought in Theron Johnson from Northwestern as a transfer who has had a solid couple of seasons as a Wildcat. I think they could play him on the outside. I think they could play him at nickel. He's not someone that has played over the top at safety. I haven't heard or seen anything to indicate that there's a position change looming there. But if Offord just shows up and beats him out in spring ball, well, then you would know that Offord is for real and he's going to live up to all that potential and whatnot. But at the other safety position, that right now is a glaring hole. I say other safety position because Thieneman's going to play one of them, the Purdue transfer who I'll talk about in just a moment. But if Offord is able to come onto campus and truly be an instant impact guy, there is a starting spot right there. Even if you presume that Theron Johnson is the starting nickel and Thieneman is the starting safety, who's at the other safety spot? Now, there are more experienced players who might be in that position. Peyton Woodyard, for instance, was a guy who was usually first off the bench. He was a special teamser this past season for the Ducks and was usually first off the bench, or one of the first safeties off the bench when the game got out of hand and they put in the number 2s defensively there. Is he ready to go? Is he ready to be a starter? I don't know. That's something spring football might tell us more. But that position, to me, is as wide open as any on Oregon's depth chart going into 2025. So listed as a corner originally, and look, maybe he's so good he plays there. Maybe he's one of Oregon's starting corners because I look around at what Oregon's bringing back or what they could have in the secondary. And I mean, I think you've got at least 3 corner spots that are not up or that are up for grabs, shall we say. Nico Reed, Jabbar Muhammad, Dante Manning all played key roles this year. Who's replacing him? I mean, Jaleel Florence is back and coming off of an injury. Now, if he's back to full health, yeah, he's probably one of your starters. Who's the other one? I don't know. That's obviously for the coaching staff to decide. But the idea of Offord making an instant impact, I don't think is far-fetched. But he has to come in and be impressive right away. Because, it's so hard on either side of the ball to play as a true freshman. It's not impossible. It is exceedingly difficult. Maybe it's a situation where he gets worked in kind of early in the season a bit and plays more as the year goes on and he gets up to speed. Or maybe he is able to just step on the field and make an impact. Brian Smith, our lockdown recruiting guy, is bullish on what Offord is able to do as a true freshman. So maybe he'll just be so talented. He'll be the defensive version of Decorian Moore, where you just can't keep the guy off the field. You got to put him out there. He's that good. So that's one thing to watch for. Another thing to watch for that also dips into some NIL discussion is Blake Ruffino over at a different network said on a show recently, quote, I talked to somebody else in the SEC that Dylan Thieneman, the transfer safety from Purdue that Oregon got, was the number 1 player on their portal board. The money that this kid turned down to go to Oregon is kind of insane, end quote. Two thoughts there. Let's go to the football one first. Number 1 portal player, not number 1 safety, not number 1 defensive back, but some SEC program out there, maybe it was Mississippi State, and they're just void of talent. I don't know. Somebody in the SEC had him as the number 1 player on their portal board. That's pretty darn good. He did not have, according to PFF, the best season this past year. Wasn't bad, just wasn't as good as he was in his freshman campaign. Purdue had a tough year. I'm optimistic about what he can bring to that position because Oregon needs more playmaking from the safety spot. No doubt about it. So hearing that another SEC school said this is the number 1 guy we want to go get and he chose Oregon anyway, that's a good sign. Number 2 was the second part of it. Let me read you that part of the quote again. This is according to Blake Ruffino, who seemed very confident in the sources he has placed elsewhere or somewhere in the SEC. The money that this kid turned down to go to Oregon is kind of insane. That's weird. I was told reliably by I don't even know how many people at this point, no one goes to Oregon unless they're getting the most amount of money. That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, do you think it's possible? Just throwing it out there as a possibility. Do you think it could be that that's just other people not liking Oregon and projecting the easiest form of firing a shot across the bow in the Ducks' direction? Do you think that's what it could be? I don't know. Maybe. I can't say with any certainty that that's the case. I'm just saying that the evidence goes against that narrative that you see put out there a lot in a lot of different circles. But hey, let's not jump to conclusions, shall we? Wink. Got to say the word wink there for those that are listening on audio, who I appreciate as well. So let me know your thoughts on the defensive backfield in the comments below. I've got thoughts on what Oregon did to Washington. It's nice to beat the Huskies, always, in any sport. I don't care what it is, but a really, really fascinating development in Eugene. First, this episode brought to you by Talkspace. So after the Rose Bowl game, all of us probably needed some form of therapy, right? For me, that was coming on here and ranting about the game for an hour with Brian Smith and talking about it in subsequent episodes. But you, as a listener of this show, are obviously not able to do such a thing, which is why you should check out Talkspace, because therapy's a game changer, can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. Finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule, though, that can be a challenge. That is where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. You can get matched with a therapist who fits your needs within 48 hours. There's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener to this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege. Enter the promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege. Enter the promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show, which I greatly appreciate. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege, promo code SPACE80. So Oregon beats Washington yesterday, bounces back from the loss against Purdue, which was a missed opportunity. And by the way, Big Ten's tough. Ohio State went to Purdue and beat the Boilermakers on their home floor. They had not lost in West Lafayette in a hot second, I don't believe. And we saw how good that Purdue team is. Ohio State went in there and beat them. So that should make you feel a little bit better about Oregon beating Washington 82-71. Washington's 1-7 in conference play. They're not a great team. First-year head coach. They're rebuilding. I think eventually Danny Sprinkle, like Jed Fish, quite frankly, on the football field, will be good. But here's what was so fascinating about this game, because we hadn't seen this yet. TJ Bamba finished the game with 21 points. That's great news. He led all scorers with 21. Biddle and Shellstad were quiet, but Oregon's depth and versatility really showed up. Angel had 15, Cook had 13, Bartholomew 11 off the bench. That's all great. Washington looked at TJ Bamba and said, that guy is 0 for his last 11 from beyond the arc. He is a sub 30% three-point shooter this year. We are going to give him that shot. They just gave it to him the whole time. He's a 26% three-point shooter this year, which is not characteristic. He has been mid to upper 30s in each of the last 3 seasons. I mean, he was crazy hot in the COVID year, going 60% in 23 games, but he's played over 30 basketball games the last 3 years at Villanova and Washington State, and he has shot 36%, 37%, 37%. This year, for whatever reason, shots are not going down. But when I say they were giving him this shot, I mean they were sagging to the free throw line and saying, I dare you to shoot it. Now, Bamba hit 3 of them. He hit 3 triples. That's part of the reason Oregon was able to win the game. He was 3 of 9 from beyond the arc, and he was given open looks every single time for the most part. And one of them he forced up. But he was 8 of 14 from the field. Do a little quick math in your head. What does that mean his field goal percentage was on 2-point shots? That's right, a perfect 5 for 5. Now, do I want him to shoot his way out of it? In a perfect world, yes. Shellstad was slumping, and all of a sudden Shellstad couldn't miss. I know Bamba can shoot. But this strategy, I don't think it's going away. Now, Bamba had 21 points on 14 shots and only attempted 2 free throws, so maybe other teams look at that and say, no, we're not comfortable with that. But what Bamba has to do to be at his best is go watch some Jermaine Couisnard film. Couisnard never came out and shot threes to begin the game. Couisnard came out and wanted to get downhill, attack the basket. Bamba's incredibly strong. He can finish with both hands. He's great finishing through contact. He's a solid free throw shooter. He should be looking to slash and get downhill every single time. But does that get tougher when you sag off? I actually don't know that it does, because it allows him to get deep and, get to the free throw line easily. And then he's got to make, kind of one move or have one sequence that allows him to get to the rim and finish the shot. But anyway, that was fascinating, and it was more pronounced than it had been in any game this year. So I'm curious to see if that continues. But it was a good, solid win for Oregon. You never complain about winning a conference game. Oregon 16-3, 5-3 in conference. Lenardi's got them projected as a 3 seed right now. They're going to hit a road stretch here that they have to be able to navigate, but it's not the most difficult you can come up with in the Big Ten, but winning on the road is hard. Minnesota's hot. They've won 2 straight games. They're up next. That's later this week. UCLA is a week from a week from Thursday. So then they play Nebraska, then they play the Michigan schools, and that'll be really, really tough. Like there are a lot of difficult games remaining on Oregon's schedule here, but there are a lot of opportunities to pick up quality wins, stay as a projected top, 3 to 5 seed, which is where I would like to see them be able to finish by the time the NCAA tournament rolls around, be a top 3 to 5 seed. History will tell you that gives you the best shot to make a run in the tournament. So I was more than a little intrigued. It wasn't a pretty game. It was kind of ugly, sloppy. Neither team shot the three well. Neither team played as well offensively as 82-71 indicates. Quick, hilarious note. Oregon was favored by 12.5 points. They didn't have a double-digit lead the whole game. They didn't even lead for large swaths of the game, but they were strong down the stretch, which has been a consistent theme for them this year, which is great to see that continue, and you'd expect that from a veteran-laden team like this. And then they're 12.5-point favorites. They led by, I think it was 11, and Shellstad just last possession of the game, whatever, puts up a 3 and knocks it down. Suddenly Oregon leads by 14. Washington then, with 10 seconds on the clock, for no reason, comes down, shoots 3 and makes it. Good teams win, great teams cover, folks. So Washington did cover the 12.5. It was a hilarious sequence to end the game. But bottom line, Oregon wins 16-3. We'll see if TJ Bama can figure out how to shoot triples consistently. If he does, the offensive potential of this team is immense. That your leading scorer, Nate Biddle, and leading scorer in conference play, Jackson Shellstad, can combine in a game. And again, 3 of Shellstad's 11 points came when it was already over. They combined for 18 points, and Oregon put up 82. And Washington is physical. Washington does a lot of good things defensively. They just don't have the offensive talent to be a good team yet. That's a really good sign, and it's why I've been bullish on this team. They have a lot of different options. Bamba and Angel combined for 36 points. Both guys have been struggling. Good to see him get going. So, close with this mailbag question from Duck2081A. Question: is winning the conference championship really the goal now, and does it really matter? Look at the current Natty game. Dan stated you must be playing your best football at the end of the season, so expect to see younger guys in the beginning to get experience. Schedule sets up good for this next year. Sets up well would be the correct grammatical typing of that particular part of the question. But with regards to the conference championship game, I mentioned this on yesterday's show, but according to Heather Danich of ESPN, there are not going to be format changes arriving to the college football playoff. Now, I don't know if Oregon's going to be in the same position they were this year, where they're, in control of their own fate to get a first round bye. But going back this season, I'd want Oregon to lose. Give me a home playoff game. Next year, though, if Oregon loses at Penn State, that might be the difference between them going to the Big Ten championship game or not. Now, I still don't expect that necessarily, going to the Big Ten championship game, and if they don't get there, I don't think it'd be a failure of a season as long as Oregon makes the playoff. That's the standard for success year in and year out. And winning the conference championship, it certainly made a statement in the moment, and it is a statement overall that Oregon came in, went undefeated, and won the league. Like that should not be ignored. It'll get overlooked, at least in the immediate aftermath. We're still not even a month removed from Oregon getting blown out in the Rose Bowl. So that's what everyone remembers about the season. But you have to try and go back, go through your data banks. Why am I forgetting? Zola style in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Go through the data banks and remember, what did it feel like to come in to the Big Ten in the first year and win the conference that Paul Feinbaum just declared? Now, his word is not everything per se, but he's an SC homer, and even he admits, the Big Ten owns college football right now. Well, Oregon won the Big Ten this past year. That was pretty darn good. And it felt pretty darn great in the moment to realize, wow, Oregon just came in and won this in the first year. That's not what everyone remembers. It still happened and was rather impactful. So, Oregon's definitely at the point, at least for me, where winning a conference championship is great, but it's not the goal. It's not what everybody wants, because we've seen it before. Oregon won the Pac-12 in the COVID season, and in 2019, and in 2014, and in 2009, 10, and 11. Pac-10, 12, and whatever it was. We've seen that several times. It's great. It's exciting. It gives you an opportunity. it could be worthwhile one day if Oregon is, 10-2 going into the Big Ten championship game. Like, let's say, for instance, Oregon loses to Oklahoma State in an upset and then loses to Penn State on the road and wins every other game. Suddenly that Big Ten championship might be the guarantee that they get into the playoff. That's where I think the conference championship game can become the most impactful or important for Oregon football going forward. Because nowadays, especially after this season, winning the conference championship, from plenty of people, might celebrate some in the moment. Sure, that's great. It's going to feel like winning a bowl game. Seen it, done it, waiting for that one season. So, yeah, the attempt to raise the importance of conference championship games by giving them buys actually resulted in the opposite effect at times. It's not going to be that way every year, but at times, because you look at what happened with Clemson. They don't get into the playoff if they're not in the ACC championship game and if they don't win the ACC championship game. So, end of rant. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.